Ever stop and wonder why you do the things you do? Why one part of you wants something but another part wants the exact opposite? Well, today we're diving into one of the very first and definitely most famous maps of that inner world, Sigmund Freud's theory of personality.
Right? It's that feeling you really want another slice of cake, but this little voice in your head is shaming you about your diet. Or you have a brilliant idea in a meeting, but something just freezes you up. Freud said this isn't just you being indecisive. Nope. He argued this constant internal conflict is the very engine that drives our personality.
Okay, so to understand this inner battle, we first have to get a layout of the battlefield. And according to Freud, it's a place that's mostly hidden from our view. This was his big revolutionary idea, that we aren't really the masters of our own minds. The real things driving our thoughts and actions are operating in the dark, totally outside of our awareness.
And his famous analogy for this is, of course, the iceberg. That little tip you see poking out of the water, that's our conscious mind, everything we're thinking about and aware of right now. Just below the surface, you've got the preconscious. Think of it like a waiting room for memories that you can easily pull up if you need to. But that massive, giant chunk of ice hidden deep underwater, that's the unconscious. It's this huge reservoir of our primal fears, deep-seated desires, and repressed memories that, believe it or not, secretly shapes pretty much everything we do.
So who exactly is living in this mental iceberg of ours? Well, Freud said our personality is basically this constant tug of war between three powerful forces. It helps to think of them as three totally distinct characters, all living and arguing inside your head.
First up, you've got the id. This is the most basic, primitive part of us. We're born with it. It's pure, unfiltered instinct. The id is that voice screaming, "I want it and I want it now." It doesn't matter if it is food, a new gadget, whatever. The id couldn't care less about rules, logic, or other people's feelings. It just wants immediate pleasure.
Okay, next we have the ego. The ego is like the CEO of your personality. It has to deal with the id's wild demands, but it also has to deal with, the real world. The ego understands you can't just snatch a donut off someone's plate. So its main job is to find realistic, socially acceptable ways to get the id what it wants without causing a total disaster.
And finally, there's the superego. This is your conscience. It's that inner moral judge that's been built up over time by absorbing all the rules and values from our parents and from society. The superego is the one telling you what's right and wrong, making you feel proud when you do the right thing, and hitting you with a wave of guilt when you mess up.
So you see the dynamic here, right? You have the id demanding instant pleasure, the superego demanding moral perfection, and the poor ego stuck right in the middle, just trying to broker a deal that works in reality. For Freud, a healthy personality is all about having a strong ego that can manage these two loud voices effectively.
So, where does this whole internal setup even come from? Well, Freud had a theory for that too. He believed it was all built, piece by piece, during our earliest childhood years through a series of developmental phases he famously called the psychosexual stages.
Now, in each of these stages, the id's pleasure-seeking energy, which Freud called the libido, is focused on a different part of the body. His idea was that if a child's needs at any stage were either not met or maybe met too much, they could get fixated. And that fixation could lead to specific personality traits later in life. For example, he thought a conflict in the oral stage might lead to things like smoking or overeating as an adult, or that issues during the anal stage around potty training could result in someone who is obsessively neat or the complete opposite. Okay, so what happens when that constant battle between the id and the superego gets to be too much? When the ego is overwhelmed, it creates a lot of anxiety. To protect us from feeling that anxiety, the ego has this whole toolkit of unconscious strategies it uses called defense mechanisms.
The most basic defense mechanism of all is repression. This is when the ego literally shoves a painful memory or an unacceptable thought deep down into the unconscious. You're not just forgetting it, your mind is actively working to keep it buried so you don't have to deal with it.
Then you've got denial, which is a bit more straightforward. It's just flat out refusing to believe or even see a reality that's too painful. Like someone who gets a really tough medical diagnosis and just insists, "No way, the doctors have to be wrong, I feel totally fine."
And another really common one is projection. This is where you take your own feelings, ones you're not comfortable with, and basically pin them on somebody else. So instead of admitting you're really angry with a friend, you convince yourself that they're the one who's angry with you.
So after all that, what do we make of Freud's ideas today? I mean, his theories completely changed the game, but they are also some of the most criticized ideas in the entire field of psychology. Let's kind of look at the pros and cons. On the one hand, Freud gave us huge concepts we still talk about all the time: the unconscious mind, the critical importance of childhood, even the very foundation of talk therapy. But on the other hand, a lot of his theories are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to prove scientifically. Critics say they're often unfalsifiable, way too focused on sex, and just don't have the hard evidence to back them up.
This quote from Freud himself feels pretty perfect here. Whether you think he was a genius or just a really strange guy from the Victorian era, his ideas have this soft but persistent voice that just refuses to go away. They absolutely continue to influence how we think about our minds, our culture, and ourselves.
Which brings us to one last question for you to think about. When it comes down to it, who's really calling the shots in your head? Is it your rational ego, your impulsive id, your moral superego, or is it something else entirely? Freud may have kicked open the door to our inner world, but the exploration is definitely far from over.